We have a quorum. All right, is there a motion to return to open session?
Yes.
Second.
Good motion, second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it. Okay, Brandy, you were mentioning that.
Yeah, we were just kind of comparing notes. I think the clerk's office has the most updated amounts for the accounts that were designated for court services. So that will adjust the ask just slightly. So Jason and I were just comparing and was able to confirm that $280,000 did in fact go back into the account from the benefits, right? That was voted on for the budget board.
Yes. Yeah.
So it was already in there?
Yeah, we moved it back in post P&T after it was added
Okay.
So that's in. That's great.
So that's in here?
in the general fund. Yes,
General fund.
So how much do we have in there that can be encumbered against whatever dollar amount contract we have?
Okay, so general fund, we have $331,057.59. We also have a small balance in the court services fee fund, $1,260, and that was $7,576.77.
Can you say it again? Sorry.
$7,576.77. And then we also have a balance in the GPS user fee fund account in the total of $10,834.17.
do you mind reading the general fund
057 and 59 cents. So it looks like the grand total available between the three funds is the $349,471.53.
What was that again? I just added those three numbers up and, well, let me redo it because I may have. But
Okay.
I got 342, 648, 53.
That's what I got.
349, 468, 53.
Yeah, 349, 468, 53.
Yep, that's what
I got it the second time. I must have
that's correct.
did something wrong.
No, you said 349 for what?
68, 53.
53.
And this is that GPS fee that we were talking about closing at one point.
This.
You had mentioned that we needed,
I
the
think
DA's office was still putting money in or drawing money out.
Yeah, I think with everything going on, we were going to leave 1260 open and maybe talk about how we want to handle that.
This is the GPS user fee.
Okay.
Yeah, the 10,834.17.
And the thing that didn't register with me until this morning was that the contract for the first 6 months for team says that it's a flat fee contract. But we're not paying them that, we're paying them whatever they invoice us for, which,
That's what
That
I
is correct.
mentioned
and I know somebody mentioned I did.
yesterday or the day before, that while I really appreciate Chris sending the invoices, and I think according to the Purchasing Act, we probably have to have the invoices and pay for the services that are rendered, the actual services that are rendered, the contract that was moved before and that was attached to the agenda yesterday mentioned the flat rate contract, which I don't think is probably the right language to use, because it needs to be a reimbursement of expenses paid associated with the services.
A contract is checked for form and legality. Is that legal to do that?
I don't know, and
Well, it was checked.
I don't see our
According to
council here.
It's this, so. I don't know.
I would
Did
assume
you,
it was
did you
checked.
send
I
that,
think the,
when you sent the reconvening notification, that was all this, and I added it to my calendar, did you include the DA's office, the council?
They're on the normal, so I just use my normal.
They're not here.
To that flat rate issue, in the proposed language that I presented today, I did not address that. I
Kids-
thought perhaps Miles.
Yeah, Joe and I talked about that, and our thought was that you guys were addressing that piece.
That's a pretty easy fix
Yeah.
during the meeting if that's what we need to do.
Yeah, I can
Basically,
certainly talk to him again about that.
Well, in BOCC yesterday, Miles was talking about the metrics and the different
Yeah.
stuff. And
Yep.
so we didn't want to weigh in on that language since you guys were already, we thought, working on that. We worked on some of the other general provisions. And
but Chris can correct me, but generally, it says it's a flat rate contract, and then it has the language about submitting detailed invoices, et cetera, immediately below that. So that's, I think, I don't want to speak for him, but I believe that's why he's submitting those invoices, probably just indicate the flat rate amount. It's contracted for amount not to exceed X, payable upon invoices or something like that. That could
I just wanted to.
probably be addressed.
I showed there about two invoices that I have. So far, they're a total of about 37,000 under over 2 months. So anyway. Thanks for waiting while I ran to catch up.
that's fine. Hey, you know what? I say all the time, just because somebody gets from point A to point B faster than somebody else, person may stay at point B and the other person is point G when you're still not there at B. So, no worries. So based on those numbers, if we encumbered every penny of those three accounts, we would have 349, 468, 53 available
Right.
to encumber against a contract.
And those, the service fee or special revenue, whatever they call them, those will not grow at all, right? Like that, there's no,
Kathy Taylor is receiving some little bit of money. What is it, $4,000 or
A
something?
little over 4,000.
So far this year. So that GPS fee will continue to grow, but way shorter than, before. I think, some years it was 40, some it was 85, some it was it won't be like that. Based on the conversations that we've had with the contract provider about not collecting.
and going back through and looking at the different meetings and some of the other things that have happened, what is the total number that we actually need for the next 6 months contract?
that's what I was gonna ask.
I did reach, Chris and I had a really great conversation about, is it the 675 or is it the smaller amount that he mentioned in a meeting? And so I just thought it'd be best if he addressed it.
Okay.
So we all could hear.
Mr. Chair, thank you.
Yeah.
So, again, just as a history of where we're at this point, after the original contract for 1.35 million and change was approved, and then we had to come back and say, we need to redo this to 6 months because we didn't have the monies encumbered. The board of, the budget board, through a series of meetings, made a decision to fully fund half of the 12 months at 675 and change. Immediately after that budget board meeting, Mr. Compton, Commissioner Mon, Jessica, myself, our CFO, whose name is Melissa Hedrick, and Jamie Patterson met together, and Cody, Commissioner Mon and Jessica gave us some very clear instructions that we needed to do anything that we could to try to identify some savings in our budget. That, you know, it's going to be a tight year and so on and so forth. So what we did internally at team is we looked at what we could do to try to squeeze it down. And internally, not officially, but internally, we created a budget ourselves of I'm sorry, the print is so small, 1.321. I'm to a point now where I can't read or.
463.
46325.
Right.
That is our internal. What we did within our organization, we said that we are going to do our dead level best to make this internal budget our budget. Like, we're just going to try to do our part. We're going to try to squeeze as much as we can. We're going to try to abide by a lesser budget given the instruction, even though we had up to the 675 and change, we were going to try to abide within this smaller budget for our internal practices. And so that's what we did. I would say to this body, and with an apology, that on, I don't know if it was the 18th at a previous meeting, I gave you the numbers for our internal budget because we weren't even trying to abide by the larger number budget. We were trying to do our part, what we had agreed to based on the direction from Mr. Compton and Commissioner Mon and others. Suggestion. What did I say? Direction. Suggestion. So I gave you the budget that we were working from internally as the official budget that had been agreed upon, and I misspoke. We're trying. We want to do our part. We're trying to say we care just as much about the taxpayer dollars as anyone in this room. And so when I said, guys, you know, I know it was 1.35, but it's actually 1.321. That was our internal budget, not the official budget. I'm sorry for misspeaking because I know I misspoke when I said it was the official budget. It's teams with internal budget, not the official contract budget, agreed to contract. But we were acting as if that was our budget to do our part.
So if you take out the 1.32 minus the first contract, 675 and change, minus what's the encumbrance amount over here, the 349, remaining balance is 296, 537.25.
He's going off of their internal budget.
Yes.
For the second.
Yes.
Could I say one more thing? And for sure, I would also tell you that the way that we sought to achieve that savings, that our internal budget, was by being slow to staff up to our full agreed to budget in our number of case managers and everything. We delayed some of that, and so I will tell you today, we believe and I think Mr. Nelson just alluded to this. If you look at our invoices, we have achieved that savings for the first 6 months. The issue now is we're fully staffed. Like we're rocking and rolling. And so the savings, if you look at the full 12 months, you all will have this amount. I mean, but it was all saved in the first 6 months because of the unfilled FTEs. We're fully staffed. That's what I'm trying to tell you. We never got that money to Joe's to the point of the flat fee. We don't get money until we send an invoice, and then we only receive that portion of the up to 675. So come December 31st, you will be at least $29,000 to the good in the first 6 months. The county keeps that money. We never got it in the first place. What I want the budget evaluation team to understand is that the savings, the lesser budget that we operated on internally, the number that I gave in a previous meeting that we're working off of, that savings has been achieved. I don't know that we're fully staffed now. So if you look at the contract as a whole, it's gonna be 29,000 and change less than, because we accomplished that goal, but it's already been accomplished. If we try to take this lesser amount and apply it to the next 6 months instead of the full year, we may be in trouble.
So you're gonna bill
ask
for
is
more.
still- Your ask is still the 670.
Yes, sir, but yes. Hard yes. Underscore, circle, yes. But when you guys look at the end of the year, the total amount will be less because we didn't use all of the first 675 because of what we were asked to do.
Correct.
And, okay, I hope I'm explaining that correctly.
Well, the difference between what you invoiced for this half of the year and what you were authorized for, that's still encumbered and can be spent to cover the invoices in the second half of the year plus whatever we come up with now. So that's, I think, what you're saying.
Yes, sir. I
Another
think
way of saying
money's
it.
still with you.
Mhm.
Yes,
Okay.
But you have not billed yet for December.
we have not.
And so you're not sure, I'm assuming, what exactly that'll look like.
I want to be transparent. I believe that we're going to come in at about $80,000 to $84,000 less than our up to allotted amount.
Mhm.
So I think after we bill for December, I spent all afternoon yesterday afternoon on this. I think that, because I want to say it again, we care just as much about being efficient as anyone in this room. For the first 6 months, because we took such a slow start in staffing up, because we wanted to follow the suggestions
Mhm.
and be a good team player here. I think that at the end of the first 6 months, there will be about $80,000 left that the county gets to keep. But I just want to be able to say again, with everything, we're fully staffed
Mhm.
now. So that money's still there, still yours. We never received it. But I do think that we're more likely to need the full
Full 675.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
But if you're not gonna need the 80, we could unencumber the 80,000 of what's tied to the current first 6 months and utilize that 80 with another, I mean, you would take the 80,000 off. The contract, what I'm contemplating here would be that the contract would be the 675. It's just the funding of it.
Mhm.
You would have the current monies that are in there. You'd have $80,000 that you could free up from the encumbrance of the first 6 months, 675. And then we would have to find other additional
remaining.
dollars. Yeah.
The only bad
We'll
thing,
have a timing issue.
right, exactly,
The invoice for
because
December won't be in
until January, and that has to clear before we can unencumber.
on the first.
Mhm.
We'll realize it after the year.
Right.
We'll find it in the bottom of the washing machine.
Hey, that's.
I can never find it. I know.
It goes the way of the sausage.
in my pocket, yeah.
What about some of the one-time startup expenses you had? You did spend those, like on the software, and maybe some other things like that. Are those going to be the same expense the
Right.
second half of the year?
Roughly. I will tell you, in looking at the startup costs, and I haven't, I want to be as clear as I can. The startup costs primarily are in the neighborhood of like maybe $37,000, and that's for the software MIS system. I think we spent 17 of that so far, somewhere in that neighborhood. So the startup cost is just, it's not as much. We've upgraded our MIS system. I will tell you, we've added a couple of phones and some one-time expenses within that 37,000, just for the extra employees that we hired. But it's just not a lot. We were already we had most of the infrastructure in place. we just added the startup costs, as I'm seeing it in our budget, and what we had asked for were primarily in software and just the ancillary.
What about the incentives? I think the other day you had mentioned that you weren't gonna need.
Oh, it was only 30,000 in incentives budgeted and they've already spent 29.
We have.
Right, but I'm just saying that when you're looking at the second half of the year costing the same as the first half, you get 675 and 675. But if you don't have some of the expenses in the second half of the year that you have in the first half of the year, it would seem that those would be different numbers, unless there's expenses in the second half of the year that you didn't have in the first half of the year, or maybe you had the same expenses, but it'll be a higher rate the second half of the year.
So, Mr. Chairman, what we did when we built the original budget, it was built on a 12-month period of time. Again, it's going to come out in the wash. I know it is. At the end of the day, we've tried to move to a 675 on the front end and 675 on the back end, and where we could create efficiencies by purchasing the incentives, which are the bus passes 2 for 1. We've done that, accounting for the fact that that's going to get us through the full 12 months and not just the 6 months. So we're in this period of where we're looking at the budget both on one hand from a 12-month period of time, and then we're also trying to work within the 6 months as well and create the same efficiencies that Jeff suggested.
So if this is, the contract is really reimbursement for services provided,
Mhm.
and I don't know where I got this budget, but it lists on here computer, cell phone, office equipment, MIS software, ankle monitor software and equipment, and administration fee, and then some indirect expenses.
Mhm.
I mean, this sounds like we're paying or including in what the contract is things that really you guys should have just administratively. I mean, computers, cell phones, your administrative costs are what they are. Why is that a separate line item?
We had some of it. We didn't have all of it.
But it's like there's a, and it's not on you. I think it's on how the county did this, but that should have, in my mind, that should have all just been included in what your budget was. It looks like we're buying things that you'll keep, which
Well,
this seems strange.
not to chase a rabbit, but just to tell you that what we have done with team also manages the community sentencing program for Oklahoma County. And there's equipment that we have to administer that program. It's a county program. At the end of the day, if we stop doing that program, the equipment that was purchased by the county for that program goes back to the county. And what we were told initially when we took over these services, that same principle would be utilized if at any point in time, any of the items that we have purchased for court services with this county contract, if we stop using them,
So any unused consumables, any equipment.
it's how we've done it for 10 years in other programs.
But once again, that kind of stuff, which I think is great, and I appreciate that, but that stuff is not delineated in the contract, right? Those are kind of key provisions that, I mean, you're adhering to, but it's not memorialized in the document itself.
Mr. Chair,
And that's not on you.
I'm just trying to tell you that's what gets tricky. The original contract was for 12 months, and we built this, and we said if we're going to do it, this is what we're going to need. And we presented this to everyone, and that's exactly what we have. And so what I'm trying to say, and I think we're all saying the same thing, there are going to be some additional costs there are going to be some costs in the first 6 months that may not be in the second 6 months. Consequently, because we're fully staffed, there's going to be some additional costs in the second 6 that weren't reflected in the first 6 months. But when you take it as a whole, everything will be accounted for.
Well, and that's an advantage of doing this contract on a month-by-month invoice basis. So you're not gonna receive more reimbursement than what you've utilized. So at the end of the year, we're only paying you what you've used up to a certain amount,
Yes,
and
ma'am.
it may not be that certain amount.
Yes, ma'am, and I don't know if I said it in this meeting or another meeting, and I don't honestly even know what day it is right now, but, I would tell you that that's why we also said some of the invoices, like in 1 month, they may be 85,000.
Right.
And in another month, they may be 108,000. And because we're having to purchase, like when the software license are due, and when some of when we add staff, we have to get them additional equipment to get them set, all those things. But it's exactly what you're saying, but it can never be more than
Right.
in this period of time. And we don't get it until we spend it, and we only get reimbursed for the allowable. And it's a great system of accountability. We don't want, let me just tell you, I didn't even know the flat fee thing was an option. So, or like a lump sum payment. We welcome the accountability to say this is exactly what we spent.
Or 12 equal payments. 6.
Just for clarity, you had mentioned community service. I just want to make sure, we used to have the community sentencing program, and I think, which is a state kind of program. Are you guys running that one as well? So what you were talking about a second ago was separate from that program.
Yes, sir. I'm talking about community sentencing, not community service.
Okay, and there's a clear wall in your organization
100%.
between
Oh, yeah.
the funding needed for that versus the funding.
It comes from two different sources.
Yeah.
Reports come back from two different, yes, 100%.
Okay.
It's a contract with the state.
Yeah.
I appreciate your time this morning.
Thank you guys for all the time you're doing.
One thing that, nonprofits and governmentals are a lot alike, limited resources. We will not be able to get everyone out that qualifies for this program. We have to work within a budget. This year has been unique the way it all went down. And I think next year there'll be a lot of squaring up. I already know that you won't be given a budget from the county. You won't be given an amount. And a budget will have to be presented, and I'm saying it now on record that it's going to have to be less than what it is this year. If we just looked at what we used in general fund dollars for the pretrial services, it's $1.2 million, $1,269,003. It was the 1.184 that was in the general fund budget, and it was an infusion of $76,000 into GPS fees. All the other revenue streams are gone. The amount from individuals, I know I've said 1 year it was 47,000. That was just GPS fees. But if I add up everything that came from users, which is community service fees, GPS fees, and CBR standard fees, that was 58,000 that year. The year prior, when I was stating 85,000, it was just GPS fees, and that's what a question was posed to me when I looked. But if you roll in all the revenue that came in from individuals, users, that year it was 95,667. So next year will be different. I'm hoping for savings in OR bond, PSA. I think we really need to look at the 781 money. It can be used for pretrial services. That's coming in about 2.4 a year right now. It can be used for subcontractors. I think we get through this year, but this will not be the year that determines how this program works going forward.
Mhm.
It just can't. And whether it looks something like 3 people qualify today, but you don't have room, you just don't take them. And until someone is released out of this program, then the jail knows that they can fill that spot. We're just going to have to work within the parameters. And I know what you're wanting to achieve, which that's fine. It's just, there's still limited resources. I know for my boss and my direction today is to go ahead and do the 675 for the next 6 months. With all that said, next year will be a shore up. And I'm not just saying just a team. We're talking CJA.
Mhm.
We're possibly talking DA / public defender with the 781 money. I know since we met last, I have had so many emails and calls, which is fine. I did put down some notes on one sheet of all the answers that people had asked me in the last 24, 48 hours, and I'll pass that out. I just want, as we're going forward, to really all be on the same page with numbers. And hopefully this will help. I also did a summary of the 781, very broad summary, but I think that is definitely a place to look. So I hope that'll help just going forward, but that's where we stand on it.
Appreciate you bringing up 780, 781. Joe and I spoke with with Speaker Steele about that, as well as potentially some other things that we can look at going into the next fiscal year to help shore this up.
Chris, my thoughts on that particular statement. Has there ever been a time where, as a group, we've ever voted for less than a flat budget? What I mean by that is the reason that would be concerning for me, if that is the end goal. I'm just speaking for what my perspective would be if I were to write it down in my diary. Would be that I can't imagine that if it's approved and pushed through today and throughout the next couple of days, that same group of elected officials come July, it's like, okay, we've seen the error of our ways. Let me just reverse it back. Generally speaking, you just don't see that happen. I'm not saying it won't. And what I mean by that is that almost every July, if we were to take a vote right now, I can almost guarantee what our vote's going to be in July. That's to make a flat budget moving forward, which would take this exact number and move it forward. Do you follow what I'm saying?
That's what I'm saying,
Yeah.
that we don't do that.
Right.
You're wanting to treat it similar to what we did OSU extension before.
And again, like from my perspective, I'm not going to be able to change my vote. It's not because we don't see value in the program, not because, but effectively from where I said what it looks like we've done as a county is we've taken a group that worked for the county. We've altered the lives of how many people work for Grant, 10, 12, 14, I don't even know. We've taken them, we've changed their life. They've had to make, career choice changes right in the middle of maybe their life. And the promise was that it would be at or below the number, not just for team, collectively. He's the one that's been the target of this, and that's not, and it seems like he is, but that's not what it is. But collectively, the number is supposed to be at 1.3 or less. And not only is it not at that, it's 30% higher. I don't know of a single group that has gotten a 30% bump in this mechanism ever since I've sat on this board, which is nowhere near the experience of some people. So again, I'm not going to be able to change my vote today, but at least publicly, I at least wanted to say that, we're pushing through a 30% increase or something, altering the lives of tons of employees. We've altered the lives of tons of employees that are now allowed to look for jobs, had to retire, had to do other things. Again, that's why I'm still in the position that I'm in.
So, Christy, to your point, then would you be more supportive? I hate to put words in your mouth, but would you be more supportive if we were going to pull money from anywhere to fund a contract above and beyond the dollars that we have available, which is the 349, 468, 53, that would come from the one-time general fund reserve dollars, not the ongoing general fund reserve dollars?
So I think this is a unique situation. I think yes, to answer your question, I'd be comfortable with that. If we don't do that with the other recommendation we're bringing, we're looking at 1.1 in reserve for 6 months. We all know how the last 2 years went down. I'm not comfortable with that. That's one BET number. But we know we've got stuff on the watch list. But yes, I'd be supportive using on one-time funds.
Our concern from District 1 was not just about an additional expense this year. Stuff happens, you have unintended things happen, you have expenses occur that you have to fund in a fiscal year, right? Our concern wasn't just an increase now, it's how that is sustainable into the future, right? I get what Christy's saying. And if we treat it like we did OSU Extension and say, hey, team can't help the fact that somebody told them they could have the same budget that court services had before. And I believe you when you say that's what you were told, right? That you guys were going to get that budget. And so you were operating off of that budget as you were, kind of building your program here. No fault of theirs that they built that. And we told them, somebody here told them that that was going to be their budget without the foresight of determining the other expenses that are also associated with making the change that we made, right? Which is now a contract with the district attorney's office for an FTE, as well as an MOU with the Criminal Justice Authority for 3 FTEs. And then we also have $42,400, something like that, in IT for some, software related expenses. So I think what Christy's saying is potentially a way to move forward to get us out of the lurch that we're in right now, but set the expectation, let everybody know moving forward that going into next fiscal year, that number's going to have to be lower, or we're going to have to look at other potential solutions. But it gives us an opportunity to move forward, the contract provider to move forward and make it a situation that will be sustainable into the next 1 year, 2 years, 5 years down.
When you mentioned that team was told what their budget was, is that not the amount that's in the contract?
I believe you were told that you were going to get the court services, but is that what you had said?
Well, that is what the contract amount for the full year would be, the 1.350, or is it?
1.6.
He was
All right.
told, yeah, probably the 116.
Okay.
Which, if they were able to take
For 1.36.
1.3.
Not 3.1.
Yeah, and if they were able to take the FTE that's with the DA's office, and I understand why they couldn't and why that's not appropriate. I'm not saying that it should be any different, but that was not, I guess, thought about. It's my assumption that didn't go into the calculus, that expense, as well as the individuals pulling the NCICs. I think if they were able to have those employees over there, we would be at that expense from before. But I mean, it's kind of looking at, we're gonna, not to compare this to a vacation or anything, but if you're planning your vacation and you're setting your budget for it, and then all of a sudden you're like, we're driving, we have to pay gas, we have to pay for gas, we have to pay for this, we're going to have to stop and get 2 or 3 meals. We didn't include that in our budget. Now all of a sudden, how are we going to come up with that extra money, right? I think that's kind of what we did here. We were planning for the big piece of this, the biggest piece as far as the expense, but we weren't looking at some of the other expenses that also have to be paid for, and got ourselves into a situation to where it actually is costing more. So I would hope that if we do fund this, that it would be out of the one-time reserve dollars, not the ongoing, and that we would take the opportunity to look at the DA's contract. That may be something that we need to pull back in-house. Maybe that individual needs to be here at the county, or maybe a different solution. Same thing with the folks that are at the jail pulling the NCICs. I think we need to look at all of it. And I think I think we were all kind of in agreement with that, right? I mean, I've heard most everybody say that around the table, that this needs to be something that we look at as a whole and not just looking at team to make up the difference, we need to look at all of the providers involved in this.
Jason, to that point, I made a comment at one point here in one of the BETs that, I used the whole order of operations thing. Because order matters in these scenarios. And like I said, it sounds like we're just like driving, like pushing this team, and that's not at all, because I think had it happened the way it should have probably happened, when team went to the DOCC and said, this is my contract amount at 1.35, you've got 1.362, I'd have been, yes, that's the vote. That's the vote to move it over. And then when the DA's office or the jail would have been thrown over, then we'd have been voting no against that. So I think that just what happened is that collectively somehow team had a contract out there first. All of a sudden these other two got pushed through. They got money out of the account that where it shouldn't have come from and never came back to this board. And the team is one left standing on an island. Again, it's not an attack on team. It's collectively as a whole. The thing just got more expensive. And honestly, it wasn't team that did that. It was the whole bunch of it that pushed it over that original number. And I think that's where at least from our office, we're trying to shore up, and how did we get there? And honestly, how do we not let that happen again? Because it's problematic again.
I know it's going along that same line of thinking. I get what is the domain and the purview of the BOCC on contracts, but I'm concerned when I see kind of how things are with the jail trust big picture over 4 years when it was created by the BOCC, and then I see this, which is a much smaller scale thing. When you start making structural changes like that, it seems to me there's enormous value in including BET and the budget board in that, because there just are so many moving parts. It's day-to-day contracts, that kind of thing, that makes sense. We don't need to see all that, but anytime we go to make some big structural change, there's always the potential that.
That's the thing about our committee, is we are not a binding decision. Those authorities rest with BOCC, regardless of what this committee comes up. I know that we do great work here, and we do great task in defining where money's come from, what monies are available, and how things work. Ultimately, that decision rests with BOCC. Based on my recommendation, I think there was some indication in yesterday's meeting and also in the paper that this body has some control over that.
No more than P&G, but
No.
problem
Contracts
is-
shouldn't be approved unless a budget, bottom line. I mean,
But again,
well, and again,
and
it
if they're
kind
not
of,
budgeted, then
Right.
it's time to get it to BET and figure it out.
but it's, BOCC executed here, but yet it's the budget board's problem. That's I think what we're saying. And
Jason, as a member of the BOCC, one of the three, I agree with you completely. I think we jumped the gun. This was something that should have started at BOCC, and BOCC should have said, listen, we see the value in taking this from in-house and doing a private-public partnership, and we can see all these efficiencies and all these gains, and we can grow this program and provide all kinds of services that are greatly needed to the individuals that were already in our program. But there's going to be some potential financial impacts here. We need to send it to BET to make sure that the county can fund the decision that we want to make. I think it needs to start at BOCC, because if BOCC doesn't want to do it, we're wasting our time in here having a conversation. We shouldn't use this group to strong arm BOCC into doing contracts. I want to be clear there, but I do think that BOCC also shouldn't use the contract to strong arm budget board for funding.
it's a start and then.
And I'm not saying BOCC did that. I think it was just something that
Because
happened.
we have
because
no
we were
official
moving so
action to
fast.
take, really, so it would start and end with BOCC, but to have just a review, I don't even know what the official action would be other than to call it to everybody's attention. Does anybody see any issues with it? I just know when in some casual conversations, not necessarily in this meeting, you were talking about the federal requirements and expectations on NCIC checks and that kind of thing. And so I know there was at some point that came up, that if you'd been in the room or sheriff had been in the room or something, somebody would have said, hey, wait a minute, what about those positions? And we're never given the opportunity to do that. So it's, I don't know what the official action would be, but just a courtesy and kind of as a self-preservation thing for the BOCC. It's like, can you guys please take a look at this? Tell us if you see any problems with it, especially on structurally significant type stuff.
Again, and I don't think any of it's malicious inherently, because I mean, I think again, what happens, I think there was a certain number there. Every one of the contracts that were presented came in under that number. It stands to reason that a lot, in my opinion, a logical BOCC member would have said, okay, sure, this contract is under the amount that we have budgeted for that line item. Let's go ahead and approve it. It's just collectively is what threw it over. Again, it's the DA's contract was less than the 1.36, team's contract was less than the 1.36, the jail's contract was less than the 1.36. So they all were under the number that was budgeted. So sure, they approved it. They thought the money was encumbered there. But again, I don't know. We committee ourselves to death at the county. I mean, but I don't know how. But like another perfect example is, I mean, the jail's going out for RFP for medical. Whenever they sign that contract, and now we're bound to find another $7 or $8 million, and it's never come through this group, then what do we do? Like, I don't know how to protect against those types of things. In this case, it was just 300,000, but it's not going to be just 300,000 next time. When those things, I don't know how we protect against that.
Well, and
when other entities are able to earmark money and not earmark money, but are able to contract for dollars that may or may not have been vetted on where we could even come up with.
Well, and to your point, just to kind of expand that a little bit, Brandon, we've got, even other entities within the county-ish that, make recommendations and determinations or whatever that have these kinds of impacts. I mean, the Criminal Justice, the Advisory Board, right? I mean, they're making recommendations and determinations and telling, our provider or our department head, previously what needs to be done. But those things need to be official recommendations up to BOCC, and then BOCC, if it's going to have even the slightest potential of having a negative financial impact, needs to send it here so that we can vet it. To Jason's point, if we would have had these conversations, Brandon could have enlightened us on some stuff just on this issue, but this kind of can go beyond this issue in the future. So we need to take the opportunity to learn a lesson from what happened here so that we don't repeat it in the future with other issues.
Maybe every elected official just used to hire an employee, and the only thing you do is vote at every single meeting, regardless of what it is. They can always, you got one repository of information per office.
That's what you do with the employee you don't like.
I thought it was putting them on handbook.
We meet next week.
And I think, the model I guess I'm thinking of is the Senate or the House from time to time will assign a bill to a committee because it is a policy heavy piece that also has a fiscal impact. So I think as those things come up and go to P&G or even come here, what is the policy implication to have somebody else take a look at it? You don't slow it down. You don't have to do one then the other. I mean, you don't want BOCC spending a bunch of time on it and then the time is wasted. But
I think one good thing is that policy and governance, the members and or the alternates of policy and governance are sitting around this table as well, right? So when, as long as I'm a member on policy and governance, and unless I get direction otherwise from my boss, currently my boss is sitting right there, but into the future, I will make a commitment to when we hear something comes to us, and I think, well, I love this idea, but I do think there may be some, budgetary impacts that affect negatively the county, whether that is rising expenses or declining revenues, either one of those two, that I will bring it to the attention of this group. And I would hope that District 2 and District 3 would, feel similar, and that way we from the commissioner side that also sit here around this table will bring this stuff forward in the future.
Recommendation may or may not be the same.
Correct.
Well, then.
There's not any other comments. I'll make a motion.
Please.
I make a motion, we've done the second 6 months for teen for pretrial services in the amount of $675, $457.47 coming out of reserve, one-time funds.
That entire amount? Or
Because we
The
don't need that.
$675.
We
need
don't,
that much.
but we don't need the full 675. If we utilize the 3 funds that are already available, we have 349,
Oh, you're right, you're right.
468.
Sorry, 325, 988, 94, sorry.
And that's with the expectation that way, in putting everybody on notice, whether it's our contract provider, whether it's the DA's office or the criminal justice authority, that moving forward, going into the budget cycle for next fiscal year, that there's going to be a hard look, and the expectation is that our number collectively, whether it's the finance amount that we had to move into IT for software and all those other contracts, will be at or below the 1362
Yeah,
number total.
1.2.
So the
For
number-
every-
What was it, Brandon?
1.2.
Oh, 1.2, yeah.
The remaining balance?
Yeah, because we're just looking at the general fund.
Yes, sir.
It's out of general fund.
No,
'Cause it's
no,
in-
we have 349, 468.53. We need 325, 988, 94. And before I second the motion, I do want to add or ask, do we need to complete the action of transferring the funds from the other 2 special revenue accounts into the court services general account? Should we include that in our motion?
No.
You can't do that.
You
legally.
can't.
Yeah, we can't
No,
change
you
the bottom
have
line.
to
We'll have
cut a
to,
check.
it's gonna be, well, when you get the invoices, right? Yes. She'll have to just pay some out of the, general fund and then some out of 1260.
So we'll transfer assuming it passes and budget board passes it,
This would
the
go into
325 will go into the court services general fund M&O budget, and then Miranda would encumber against that court services M&O general fund budget, and encumber against the 1260, and encumber against the GPS.
I second your motion, Christie.
Can I confirm that number one more time, please?
325, 988, 90.
Thank you.
All right, we got a motion and a second, correct? Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Ayes have it. All right. Anybody have anything else related to any other items that are on the agenda? Seeing none? Seeing none, let's go ahead and I'll ask for board comments again, District 2.
No, thank you.
Clerk? District 3?
No.
Treasurer?
I just say, I don't think this repeats again, hopefully not. Merry Christmas.
Oh, yeah, it's Christmas.
I know, who would have thought?
Court
Busy
clerk?
working.
Assessor?
I just want to thank everybody for exhaustive efforts in researching this and working through the issues.
Sure. If we do have to have a special between now and then, I will bring Christmas cookies.
Alright.
I was gonna bring brrowies because you had mentioned the brownies the other day, and I just totally
We'd have
forgot.
marathon, we'd be like 5 or 6 hours the
Yeah.
whole day, we'd bring lunch.
I totally forgot.
Yeah, not that kind.
It was-
Not that kind of brownie.
Actually, hey, hang on real quick. Without objection, the chair will ask the clerk to make the document that the treasurer's office passed out part of the record. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Oh, you're welcome.
So moved.
So, second.
Everyone else.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it.
Oh.